Now, it's the third time lucky for Boeing. Their Starliner spaceship has now successfully launched on its first crewed mission from Cape Canaveral in Florida today. On board, 2 veteran astronauts who are heading to the International Space Station. The last attempt, you might remember, was scrubbed in the final minutes of countdown when Boeing's computer systems flagged a problem. But this, as you can see, very much smoother. Only the sixth type. Only a sixth type, I should say, of American spacecraft to take a crew into orbit, but it steps up the competition with NASA's other private contractor, that is Elon Musk's SpaceX, who have a test flight of their own planned in the coming days. Let's bring in one of our favourite people, the former NASA astronaut, once commander of the International Space Station, Leroy Chiao. Lovely to see you again, Leroy. This is the first time this capsule is taking 2 people up into space. It looked a lot better. Was this a textbook launch?
This looked like a flawless launch. I didn't hear any calls of even the smallest anomalies. Everything, as we say in the business, seemed to be nominal. Everything seems to be going very well. And in less than 24 hours, Butch and Sonny should dock to the International Space Station. So, yeah, so far so good.
What does it mean for NASA's operations? I mean, what does it mean for costs and then in terms of exploration?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, NASA 10 years ago contracted Boeing and SpaceX to develop their own capabilities to launch NASA astronauts and others to and from the International Space Station. And so SpaceX succeeded first, and they've been launching astronauts to and from ISS for almost 3 years now. Boeing was kind of the safety factor at the time. They're the ones that know how to do it. They cost twice as much. But they'll probably get there first, and they didn't. And so Boeing, as we all know, they've suffered a lot of setbacks, a lot of problems, not only in their space business, but especially in their commercial airplane business. Big culture problems at the top, from the top down. So Boeing is struggling, and they needed this win. What this means for the future of space exploration, this means that we now have a redundant way to send astronauts to ISS. That is, if one thing happens to one spacecraft or another, one rocket or another, we have another way to do it without having to go back to rely on the Russians. So that's a good thing.
Well, that's important because the space race is on again, isn't it? We've been reporting on the Chinese landing a probe on the dark side of the moon, and we've seen the concept pictures in recent days of the research station they plan to build. This was the reaction of the NASA CEO, former Senator Bill Nelson, who's talked about the competition and what it means. Have a listen.
Now, I don't want them to get to the South Pole, which is a limited area where we think the water is. It's pockmarked with craters. And so there are limited areas that you can land on the South Pole. I don't want them to get there and say, this is ours, you stay out. It ought to be for the international community, for scientific research. So that's why I think it's important for us to get there first.
What do you make of that, Leroy? It sounds a bit Cold War. I mean, are we really talking about the Chinese landing an army on the South Pole of the moon?
No, not at all. And, you know, I understand why, Administrator Nelson is saying these things. He's trying to drum up more support for more funding for NASA. But frankly, I agree with you. It kind of rings hollow because basically, yeah, China's got space ambitions. They've been really doing well lately with their sample return mission from the far side of the moon on its way back to Earth even as we speak. They've been successfully operating a full-time space station of their own for the last several years. And of course, they have ambitions to send their astronauts to the moon, just as we, the United States, have ambitions to send our astronauts to return to the moon. But, the idea that one country or another can claim the moon, you know, the United States and others have been are signatories to the Outer Space Treaty, which specifically prohibits nations from claiming the moon. Even if a nation that was not a signatory would try to claim the moon, you can bet all the other signatories are going to come in and invalidate.
We've talked before, haven't we, just quickly, and you've always told me it's a more collaborative endeavour than pretty much all the other things we do on Earth.
That's true. That's true. Just look at the ISS for an example. You know, former World War II and Cold War enemies came together to create the most audacious construction project ever in space, and it's operating very, very well. And so I would expect or hope that collaboration could continue into the future. Not looking so good to continue collaborating with Russia, unfortunately. But, you know, in China, we never have successfully been able to politically get there, the United States side, to collaborate with them. But, you know, I think we'd all be better off if we could work together towards this civil space program.
It's one step back, two step forward. You know how it is, Leroy. Good to have you on the program, my friend. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Panel will be here